Hello, my name is Sally Gibson and I'm the Managing Director here at Dawley's. I'm joined today by Neale Lewis, who is a scaling up coach and strategic exit expert. So he challenges organisations to see culture not as something imposed on from the top, but something that is lived and shaped daily by behaviours with the team and by the behaviours of the leadership of the company. I've been working with Neale now for the last few years, and one of the first exercises that we did together was to start defining Dawley's core values, which found has really helped shape Dawley's and helped build out our success over the last few years. So why do you think defining your culture is so important?
Well, it's very similar to setting down the rules of the game. And if you don't set down the rules of the game, you can rest assured your team will. And I can guarantee it will not be the type of culture that you will love. So it's really important that you need to clear, and it's clarity of what are the things that you absolutely believe in, are the right ways of doing things, and equally around here, what are the wrong ways of doing things. So if you think about a football pitch, we'll have boundaries, and really it's being able to understand what's inside the boundaries and what's outside the boundaries that's right and wrong. So if you cast our mind back a couple of years, we used actually an exercise from Jim Collins. It was called the Mission to Mars exercise. And Jim calls you don't sort of just push on them too hard. You've got to go and discover your values and figure out who are the sort of people that we really relish because they are the embodiment of what we believe is right and wrong, and those people that probably we wouldn't be putting up there because the sort of behaviours there we don't value so much. And then once you've got that clear, you then refine it a bit, and then probably you've got 5 or 6 of those core values that really define what is right and what is wrong around that.
Okay, what are some most sort of common mistakes that leaders make when they're trying to build out their culture and their core values?
What's the mistake? I guess one is just imposing what they believe are right. And that often happens in a family business because you've got your family values that you will impose those onto the organisation, which could be fine, by the way, because that's kind of who you are. But you've also got to be cognizant of the entity that it's trying to create. So here, I guess a lot of the values are all around providing amazing service, type of people that we want to have, people who are great team workers, who love fun, stuff like that. If all of those things that you believe in are anti-values, either don't fit that whatsoever, then you're going to have a heap of problems.
Yeah, indeed. And I think for us, when we sat down to do our core values with you, and it was a case of, I spent a lot of time thinking about what makes us Dawley's, what makes us, where do we do our best work, where are we performing at our best? And once I started thinking of it like that, actually the core values seem to just fall out quite easily as to what it is that, what makes us Dawley's, what makes us great.
Well, I think we almost then sort of settle on the Dawley's way. And we've got already had that. And it was like the Dawley's, what does that teach us? Well, it teaches us that, make sure we put the customers first. It teaches us that we should be always growing around here. We should have a fun culture around that. And I think you can pick it up when you come into the building. You've often said to me that if we bring new employee in or we bring a prospective customer in, people almost feel it.
Yes.
They come in and it's both the tangibles and the intangibles of what is it like around here that encapsulates those values. So then if we've got 5 or 6 core values, that's like the bedrock, then what we also had was the guiding principles. If you remember, the Dawley way gave us and informed us what the values could be. We're all about customer service, or we're all about creating a great team, having fun, or having a growth mindset and learning. Those are all really important things already that you had. And then I think we just had a few more that we added in. And then on top of that, you might also want to think about having guiding principles.
Yes.
So these are values, these are core values, but actually we've got a few other rules of the game that just help make decisions. Is this a good decision or is this a bad decision? Is this the right way of doing things around here or the wrong way of doing things around here? So those guiding principles give you swim lanes about what is right and wrong.
And it's so important, I've found as well, that if we're making decisions, it's so important to refer to those core values and guiding principles, because if they don't align with what we're thinking, chances are it's not right for the business in some way or other. We're either it's going against what we believe, or we're just not going to buy into it, and it's just not going to work in some way or another. So for us, it's now become an essential part of our decision making as a company. Is, does this really fit with our core values?
Well, I think what it also does, if you think about whenever we've got a big decision to make, we should be able to go to our core values and they say, is this a good decision or is this a bad decision? So let's say, for example, we've got a big potential new client opportunity, but actually we've got slight reservations about the way that they run their business. We might read Glassdoor and see that reviews aren't great. They don't treat their team particularly well. There's a few other red flags that come up. These should really allow us to make big decisions, but guided by what our core values would teach us and what ultimately our culture is. Equally, about making an important hire. Is this going to be a person who we think is going to be living our values, or somebody who's probably is going to be maybe a bit malignant or toxic and not a good decision?
And I think I was recently on a sort of a one-day event. We were talking about the first impressions, and it takes 7 seconds to make a first impression.
Yeah.
And going back to your point about when people walk in here, so we've consciously tried to make this a visual representation of our values, because we've all done it. We've walked into a building or an office, or when we're house buying, and we've instantly made a decision about that place or that company or that home based upon those first impressions. So it's so important for us.
Definitely. So that point again that so many people have said, oh yeah, we went on a whole day off, we found our values and stuff like that, and they ultimately, well, what you've done? Oh well, we put them on A4, we put them in the reception, and we've got our values now. No, you haven't. Okay, if you came into that and you were greeted at the reception by somebody who was enthused about your company and everything right from the get-go, everyone you met was on it, then yeah, you probably have. If you can just smell or feel that there is a tension in the air, there's everything is just people are down in the dumps and stuff like that, not even looking you in the face when you go around, then you're probably going to think this is something that's well amiss. The culture is not where it needs to be.
Yeah, it's something's not aligned here. And as you say, you can't just stick the poster on the wall and walk away. I think for me, the biggest lesson that I've learned from what we've been doing and working with our culture and our core values is the need to just repeat. So I think you've called me Chief Repetition Officer, and that is absolutely, definitely one of my hats that I wear, is that I have to be seen to be repeating and repeating, because I think we've said before as well that, not everybody learns in the same way. And so you have to be able to just present that and repeat that message over and over again.
Huge. And also reinforce, that's a good behaviour. We like that. Thank you for doing that. We've got values awards that reinforce that. Equally, if someone is pushing back on our values, is to be able to reprimand them in a way that signals that is not what I expect. That is not a behaviour that we do around here. Where does that fit against that particular value? And because if you're doing it as a way of what does our value teach us, as opposed to what I saw or felt personally, then it's a much easier way of reprimanding someone, because it's where does that teach us about by not playing as a team member or whatever it is, and you've blatantly pushed back on that.
And I think the core values for us is brought clarity. And clarity is great because it removes confusion then. And so people can't say, oh, I didn't know, I didn't understand. No, it's very clear what we stand for. And I think that's really helped us in terms of running our business and in attracting and recruiting the right people into the company. So discovering your culture, it was actually quite easy to write something down and to do that. Once I'd actually worked out what made us Dawleys, I think the more difficult part then is how do we actually bring that to life in the business? How do we create that culture day to day, and what a leader has to do to bring that culture to life? So where do you think somebody should start if they were doing it for the first time?
Well, where most people go wrong is they kind of have a day and we'll go and discover our values day. They come back, put something onto an A4, go to the reception. We've done it, we've done that. And they wonder why, their culture is not alive every single day. You've got to reinforce it every single day. You talked about a few minutes ago, living those values. So there's a number of things you can do in order to live those values. First up, you've got to communicate what they are. Yeah. Now, if you remember, we didn't just have our values, but we also wanted to strengthen some of the other rules again. We call them guiding principles.
Yes.
So there was, 5 or 6 values that we've got, and I would advocate you don't want many more than that. But you can still have guiding principles that help people understand the difference between right and wrong.
Yeah.
Again, you've got to have, if you're on a sports field, you've got the sort of the boundaries and between what's good and what's not good around that. And then everything from when you're interviewing for a candidate, just to make sure they're going to be a good fit for your values, onboarding. So that's a place to teach people, hopefully whoever you brought on is going to be a great fit, but teaching them, like you've got your company guidebook and handbook or whatever it is, these are the values, this is how we live them. And I think it's worthwhile as well explaining to the team that it's one thing just having that we've got a culture of learning or we've got a culture of caring, having fun. But you've got to explain a bit more about what that means. So just having that as maybe 2-3 words, but then you could have a sentence underneath that really explicitly talks about what that looks like in reality. So you do that, you keep making sure you communicate all the time around your values, and every meeting and stuff like that is a good opportunity to reinforce those. Reviews, taking people through their reviews. You have the values awards and those things that are designed to highlight people who have done a great job of living those values and to champion them. But probably just as importantly is if you're going to have to reprimand someone, then it's being able to really couch that around the values. So if someone has gone against the value of just simply doesn't want to learn or grow themselves, he said, well, where are our values that talk about not having a spirit of learning or growth and stuff like that? And it's a much easier way then of building a reprimand or whatever it is into that, using the value to couch it in.
So how important do you think it is to build out an environment of trust within a business?
Wow. And how many people have trust as one of their values or integrity?
Yes.
Yeah, and they have that there. And remember Enron, they are world's kind of said one of their values was all around integrity, another was around trust. And yet all they were doing was pushing about every single action they were taking was to screw all of their customers over and whatever. So yes, you've got to make sure that as a leader, you, again, as I said a few minutes ago, are the bastion. You're the person and your leadership team who are constantly holding those values and being good intent. Because if you don't, then all the trust around them just evaporates straight away. Yeah. So you've got to hold yourself in high esteem around that, and that's difficult because again, it's sometimes easy for us to think, oh, will that one really matter, or do you think anyone's going to notice around that? And they will.
They will.
Yeah, they will. So you've got to do that. I think the other thing, Sally, is you've got a big decision to make. It's easier then to go and look at your values and asking, actually, if we had been true to them, what would be the right solution for that particular problem?
Yeah, I think that's really important because if you're making decisions that don't feed into or reflect your values, then chances are they're not going to work and we're not going to buy into them, or we're just going to not deliver them very well.
Exactly that. So a good example might be that you've got a really good business opportunity coming down the road, but you do a bit of due diligence on the prospect and you actually look at them and actually looked on Glassdoor or the way they treat their customers, although they treat people, their employees, and it's not a great culture, or they've done things maybe unethical, it's not a good fit. And you may then just say, we're not going to work with these people because it would be pushing back on what we stand for and what our values are. Therefore, on the one hand, you think, well, we're going to pass by a good commercial opportunity, but we're doing it with these reasons in mind.
And I think that's really important. We've discovered that we do our best work with the people who have a similar set of values to us. Why wouldn't we? It sounds obvious, but actually it's really important. And it doesn't matter whether that company is 100 times bigger than we are. As long as we have some sort of alignment on our values, then we have a great relationship, and trust is then built between us. So it's not just trust within the company, but it's trust between you and your customer as well.
Definitely. And that is because, as you said, you are the embodiment of their values almost.
Yeah.
You are providing customer service for them. So it is really, really important. They've probably done their due diligence on you just to make sure that can we trust you with being our extension, as it were. You have to obviously bear that in mind. There may be times, as you say, that you probably or looked in the past and thought, no, there's a few red flags or signals
Yeah.
coming up from that. You then chat with the rest of the senior team and say, I think we'll pass that one by.
And I think you can also pick up things like that, not just from looking at people's websites and things, but the language they use as well. Do we have a common language, a frame of language reference?
Yeah.
And if you don't, then I think you can pretty much see fairly early on that your cultures are not going to align.
Exactly. And I mentioned Glassdoor as well. And I think increasingly now you can see on Glassdoor whether there's a disconnect between what they're saying at the PLC level or the communication level that's going out and actually what the employees are feeling or seeing from their perspective. And it's become very much an open, more transparent way now of people being able to say, I'm not sure if that's a company that I'd love to go and work for, be part of and stuff like that. So you have to really work on it. And everyone says, oh, values and that all soft and fluffy stuff, blah, blah, what do we know? I've worked with a number of engineering companies and they said, Neale, look, we brought you in to get our profits up and do this or do that. And I said, that may be so, but unless we've got really strong values, it's a bit like building a business on quicksand. The whole thing will collapse straight away. We've got to have rock solid foundations, and that's why they're called core values. So I think that's really important that you're alive to that. And again, how quickly this whole thing can fall over or fall down if you're not living the values.
Well, we're basically a people business. I mean, that's, most of our costs are in our people and we are selling people and services. And so for us, getting the right person in the right position is really, really important. So how does culture help with that sort of aspect of the recruitment?
Well, once you've really got clear about your core values, so we've got 6 or 7 in Dawley's, then you basically really want to make sure that whoever you're bringing in, they can do the job. But I think it's more important now that they are going to be really aligned around your values and your culture. So the way you do that it would be to say, well, ask a bunch of questions around your core values. So, are they somebody who is really open to learning and have got a growth mindset? Do they have a bit of spark about them that they know is going to really embellish the team? When they pick the phone up, do they have that sort of curiosity that there's going to be able to delight a customer? So you can ask a whole raft of questions at the interview stage and do some other psychometric testing just to make more likely than not that they are going to be a good fit. Not to say guaranteed, but they are going to be a good fit. Equally, you can make it very clear on your website, on your employee page, what our values are, and ask people to look at beforehand. And they should actually, if they're done right, be a dissuader for anybody who's not a good fit. They look at it and they're thinking, oh, that's not for me. I'm as grumpy as sin. I don't want to go and work with that organisation, or I hate learning. So they should also act as a deterrent. You want to create something that's like a magnet to the talent you want and a repellent to the people who aren't going to do well here.
So do you think, maybe if I'm interpreting what you're saying here correctly, that what your core values bring is clarity, and clarity helps avoid confusion?
Yes, it does. And it's interesting because you can have your values down, but I've seen so many times where you might have the London office and a Scotland office and a Liverpool office. Right. And actually, the culture feels very different in those 3 different offices, even though the values are the same.
Yeah.
The challenge as you grow and scale a company is that without constantly having the sort of same people who are bought into it and making sure to reinforce it the whole time, you've got a mini culture that's suddenly developed in Edinburgh, or a mini culture in London that's, before you know it, it's kind of taken hold of itself. So you've got to be very careful that you are keeping that and reinforcing exactly the type of company you want.
Because I think otherwise, if you don't reinforce the behaviours you do want, the opposite of that, obviously, is you're going to start getting the behaviours that you don't want.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you can be seen to be sort of supporting behaviour that is not actually what you want for your business.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous.
It's really dangerous. And the challenge is as well that people who are sometimes malignant, but they are very persuasive of others around them. So without having a strong culture, you suddenly find and wake up one day, oh my goodness, what's this monster we've created? There's a whole raft that they've created their own mini culture. So you've got to be very careful around that. And also, sometimes we turn a blind eye to behaviours that we really shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And by turning a blind eye, suddenly that is being allowed to sort of escalate, and that's given us a problem as well. So I think again, it's been really important if somebody or some team is not aligned to the values or not behaving in the right way, then you have the courage to call it.
Because they could be a high performer in terms of delivering something that you need, I don't know, sales or something.
Yeah.
But if they don't have the trust of the rest of the team, or they are disruptive or toxic to that team,
Yes.
then it doesn't matter how well they perform, it's actually destroying your business.
That's a
in
great
some way.
point, and that's often where people do turn the blind
Yeah,
eye. Is
yeah.
that they're the best salesperson, the best coder, the best marketeer, and yet you give them the benefit of that. In the meantime, they are with their egos and the disruption just downtrodden everyone else in that particular team, and you're just creating life and misery potentially for others. So, yeah, you would use their toxic is exactly how those people are, and it's a bit like a cancer. If you allow it to continue, will suddenly become very malignant. So yeah, as a leader, you have to stamp that out pretty quickly. And most of the team will thank you.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
of the team want you said, all right, okay, I'm going to take. Then we'll be other great salespeople. But having that conversation and let people know that's not to be tolerated, and that's not the type of thing that any organisation is above anybody, including the leader. We're often seeing right now. There's a case in point over last year that Brewdog, who had a very charismatic leader that really wasn't aligned to the culture anymore or living the values, and everybody in the team was calling him on it. Ultimately, he had to fall on his sword,
Yeah.
even though he set the company up and whatever, and for a while was doing a good job. But anything can become toxic for a time. So again, that's just shows how quickly you've got to take action.
And I think as well, it also reflects upon you as a leader of the business. If you don't take action, then you're then being judged by your team,
Yeah.
because you're not actually doing it. So you're not stepping, or you're not being accountable.
Yeah.
And accountability, how do you think accountability leans into the culture?
Yeah, and I think, and we've seen it here as well, haven't we? We've had one of our leaders, unfortunately, wasn't performing, but the team around him didn't have the courage to speak up and just say, actually, we've got a leader who is not living the values, is not
Yeah.
performing, but because as often happens, I don't want to dib on someone or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
That poor performance was allowed to go on for a while, and it had a big impact on the performance of the team, everyone around them. You nearly lost key members of the staff
absolutely.
around that if you had
Yeah.
ultimately taken that action.
No,
So yeah, what
yeah.
does tend to happen is people who have a toxic team member or a toxic team leader, they just say, thank you very much, we're out of here, and you've lost some A players.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have to, again, I think you went to the word accountability. You've got to then hold yourself to account and
Yeah.
others around, and encourage as a culture the people to be able to feel
Yes.
they've got their back if they do call it on someone else.
Absolutely. So if a business wants to take the employee voice seriously, so it's not top down. I mean, this has to be from the sort of, from the employee up as well. What's the one shift that you think would make the biggest impact in a company?
Well, we've got quite a few things that we've already got in play, and we've obviously talked about over the years the Rockefeller habits. And within that teaches us there's a great way of soliciting feedback, and it's a start, stop, keep conversation. So it's a great way then of getting everybody feeling that they can contribute into what's not working around here.
Yeah.
What I've seen an idea, and I can put that on the whiteboard or put it out there and just say, I think this is something that's going to improve the company. Or just we should keep doing this because it's really working right now. So I think allowing and having sort of infrastructure where people feel like they can call it, they can
Yeah.
have a voice around that. You say you encourage the whiteboard, you've got other mechanisms that people can share ideas on and those sort of things. So that's one. I think having regular one-to-ones
Yeah.
and you've got the scorecards and you can judge around that. People can then, again, feeling if there's an opportunity to just call it or suggest ways of improving our values. Obviously, the value awards and those sort of things, giving you an opportunity. We talked about that already. There are some mechanisms that, again, you can put an operation around or a standard operating procedure to make sure that's the case. I was listening to Stuart Macon, who's the CEO of Marks and Spencer last
Yep.
week, and he was saying, I'm very open about that. Everybody in the organisation, I don't know how many employees they've got, 60,000 or so, can reach out to me as a leader. And if they've got a gripe or they've got something that's
Yeah.
not working, they can let me know. Because often you have so many glass ceilings and stuff like that, and this poor CEO is the last person to find out if things aren't working,
Yeah.
or no
Yeah,
one
yeah.
wants to tell them the bad news. So he's got a way then of being able to feel what's really happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think as a leader, then it's being accessible. So going around your business, doing the management by walkabout, you can get a feel as well.
Oh, yeah, you definitely can. And I think as well that I was talking to somebody, one of your fellow contributors, and they were saying that in their business, they have town hall meetings where they bring everybody together and anybody can ask a question
Yeah.
and then they get an update on the business. Now, which is great. Love that idea, but completely impractical for us to do
Yeah.
that because we're working in an operational.
Yeah.
We've got people on the phones, we've got people in the warehouse doing things. It's very hard to withdraw everybody. And actually, we don't have a physical space where we can put 60 people in. So for certain size businesses and the type of business, it's quite hard to have those sort of open discussions. But are there any other ways that we could do that, do you
Yeah,
think?
definitely.
Yeah.
So one of the things you could do is record that session. So you could, like we're having today, a quarterly planning meet. I could just record that and say, guys, these are the big things that are happening in the business right now. These are our priorities for the next 90 days. This is where the business is focused. This is a big push on productivity, a big push on AI or whatever it is. And then you watch it in your spare time or you talk it through your team leaders or stuff like that. And then if you've got any questions, come back to your team leader. I've seen a system where the CEO, the MD writes out once a week or does a video once a week. This is on my mind right now.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
has been happening in the business, or we've just won this, or welcome Bob to the company or whatever. And that's a nice way then of being able to keep communication fresh. If somebody's got a question about what's on your mind right now or what's keeping you up at night, stuff like that, give them permission to go and have a chat with you around it. I think you just want to be as accessible as you possibly can do and being, I think as a leader, vulnerable as well, knowing that nothing's always going to be going well. I mean, we talked about it today, that literally everything we're plain sailing, wow. That there are crises and dramas going on the whole time. I think the way that you deal with those crises and dramas speaks volumes. You're going to obviously use your values to inform them on a bit. But I think it's equally important then to share with people why you made that decision and be transparent. We had a tough call here. We looked at our values, we consulted with people, and on the basis of that, this is a judgment call we made. The other thing I think is being transparent about bad news as well. I think people are pretty adult enough now to recognize again that not all going to be good news. So if we have lost a big account or we've lost a key member of staff or something's happened, they'll get it. So I think being as open as you can be with people and fronting up to them around that builds good stock.
So do you think that helps build culture carriers, for want of a better phrase? But I mean, there are people who are motivated and then there are people who are committed.
Yes. Yeah.
They really want to go that extra.
Yeah. And there's some organisations, so I've referenced Southwest Airlines quite a lot, equivalent to listeners of probably Ryanair in America, but they set up their own culture clubs and have a way then of bringing those advocates into a place where they got 7 or 8 people who are in the culture club. And one might be somebody who's just loading the bags into the plane.
Yeah.
Someone else might be a pilot. Someone else might be someone in head office. Someone else might be on the customer service team. But they're all absolutely the bastions and guardians of the culture. They're vital to a cliff for it. And they're the ones then that can give you an overview of whether or not you've got some issues right now with the organisation's culture and come up with ideas to put it right. So it's a really good format is to figure out who are the ones who would run over a cliff for you, as it were, or if you cut them through with a chainsaw, they'd have dollies kind of coming through like a rock bar. So, yeah, that's one way of just making sure you keep it really rock solid.
And so what do you think the risk is if leaders only recognise performance and don't recognise behaviour?
Well, and that goes back to the conversation we were having a few minutes ago, that if we just reward people for being the best salesperson or knocking their goals out of the park, but the way they went about it was steamrolling all their colleagues, holding information back from everyone else, doing it in a way that was totally, that for them, that's not great, So you want to get the balance right. Clearly you want to have the performance. That's why we have scorecards. But that's equally on a scorecard that we value the type of behaviours that we have as well. And that's why it's so important then to say, look, Bob, you've done brilliantly well in nailing down your KPIs and your objectives for the next, but you were a pain in the backside to your colleagues or whatever, and that's not something that we really tolerate around here. So you've got to call them on that.
And that's why we bring the core values into our performance reviews and our probation review. It comes into everything because it is indicative of the way that they are going to fit in with our company. If they're exemplifying our core values and demonstrating those behaviours, they're going to really fit in and thrive here with us and thrive with their team members as well.
Definitely, and the sort of people that we want to grow and promote and the leaders of the future will have that in spades. They're the ones who already get it and they're already telling all their mates, I can't believe how lucky we are to work here, what a great place is. But we've also seen, haven't we, how quickly that a small cell or whatever it is could really have a negative impact. You've got a lot of people working in a confined space. It doesn't take very long for a couple of things to very quickly go off in the wrong direction, and that's where you have to act very quickly to turn that around. Being able to have the courage to say to everyone else, look, this is why we made this decision to let these people go, because they weren't a good fit anymore. They might be nailing their priorities, objectives out of the park. It very quickly can
You want people who respect your culture and your core values, and I think we've all worked with people. I mean, I can think back over the years, I've worked with people who say things like, oh, well, if your face doesn't fit in, you're never going to get on round here. Well, damn right you're not going to get on round here because, you don't buy into what that company is trying to do and achieve.
No, you're right. And I think when you know it's really working well is when you don't have to call it out, their colleagues will call it out.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? They will say, look, to that peer pressure in a small team, you've got 5 of them, and one of them will just say, look, you're not living our values right now. Unless you change your ways, you're going to impact the rest of us, and that's not what we're having anymore. And they will call it, and they will use the values, and they will then push to get that person either changing their behaviours or changing their jobs. So, I think the other thing you've got to bear in mind is sometimes we see that people are a great fit for the company, Sally, but we've got them in the wrong job.
Yes.
And because they're in the wrong job, they're unhappy and it's not aligned to their personality or whatever it is. So they're really struggling. And then you've got to basically get the root cause of why you're struggling.
Yes.
Well, Sandy, you've got me doing a financial role and I hate numbers. Why didn't you tell me that? I love people. All right, well, let's put you in a people-facing role and then see them thrive again. So you sometimes see people that, have got the right behaviours, but their performance is struggling.
So it's about asking the right questions. I think somebody described it to me as when dealing with people, it's like an iceberg. So you've got the tip of the iceberg is what you see, but actually most of what's going on is below. And it's your responsibility as a leader or a manager to actually uncover some of that stuff that's going on underneath the waterline, because that's what's affecting their performance every day.
Very much so. And actually the whole company's culture, pretty much the values, the identity of the company, its purpose exists below the waterline. So everything we're about fuels what we actually see above the water, that 20% of an iceberg that's above the water. Actually, everything else we don't see in terms of the processes that drive good behavior or the values or the purpose of the organization. That is all underneath. But that's why we have to work on it so hard to make sure that what we do see is very much a result of the hard work that you put below the waterline.
Okay, so I think we've kind of ranged across a wide scope of things here. So just to round off then, so if you were coaching a new leader, is there one question that you think they should be asking themselves about the culture or how they create their culture? Was there one big question that would be useful for them to ask themselves?
I would suggest right now is how well are you doing in terms of living your values?
Yeah.
But the question that often gets the most is when I start working with either a new leader or the board of a company, is to have them write down their values for me.
Right.
And I cannot tell you how many times the blood drains out of their face when I ask them to do this. And let's say they got 6 and they might get 2 down.
Right.
And then it's a bit like the school exam, everyone's kind of looking around and doing something like that, which then tells me straight away that they haven't got values, that they are either believing in or living every single day, which is a crying shame because that happens a lot, that kind of reaction. equally, it's probably one of the reasons why I'm working with them, because then they need to know that actually they have to, if they're going to scale and grow, that's one area that rather than being soft and fluffy, they're going to have to really put and invest some time in.
Yeah.
And it's an investment, as you know.
Oh,
again,
it
as a
is,
leader,
absolutely.
you think, well, we've got this nailed, and then something else crops up and stuff like that. So having to be on it all the time to reinforce those values, to keep them moving. I mean, you're also going to evolve from time to time. I mean, they're pretty much going to stay the same. But because technology is moving so fast now, it may be that AI is going to have an impact. We might be bringing in AI agents.
Who knows?
Who knows? All sort of things. And actually, where we had our values and they were right for us 2 years ago, is that going to open up new challenges or new opportunities, the way that we set down the rules of the game?
I mean, I always think about the culture, living and embodying the culture every day. I always liken it to keeping an octopus in a bag. Every time you think you've got all of those legs in, another one escapes,
100%.
and then another one
Yeah.
escapes. Just when you think you've got
Yeah.
it all under control, something
Well,
shoots
also
off.
the challenge you've got as a leader is everyone thinks that you're okay all the time. You know, you're the boss, everything's covered, I've got that, you know, whatever. And yet you've got the weight of loads of problems and things that's going on in your mind. But you've got to come through the front door looking like you've got no problems whatsoever, you've got everything under control. Not fake it till you make it, but you've got, because I said that analogy of being like the conductor of the orchestra, if you come down, your shoulders are slumped, you
Yeah.
look like as miserable as sin and whatever,
Yeah.
that has such an impact across the whole company because they're looking to you
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
set the mood and the tempo. And
Yeah.
if your mood and tempo is negative or around that, it has a big impact. It's being able to just pay attention the way you're living your values, not just what we say, our whole demeanour.
Well, and I think that's a whole nother area,
It
isn't
probably
it?
is, yeah.
Which we could discuss on
Yeah.
another day.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Neil. It's been absolutely fascinating and illuminating, and really made me think now, what am I not doing with my culture that I should be doing? And perhaps I need a little bit of a rethink on some of the areas that we're working on at the moment. So thank you so much for
You're
that.
welcome. I was just going to be a plug there for there's a book, The Heart of Business, I've just read for our Hubert Joly.
Okay.
Hubert took over Best Buy and he didn't know anything about the sector at all. But my sense was that the reason that he was able to be successful in the turnaround is that he put right front and centre what he originally thought was the soft and fluffy stuff. That looking after your team, getting the right team on board for this turnaround, and keeping everyone aligned to what was right and what was wrong, and navigating through COVID was the result that they were able to achieve what they did. So the heart of business, which goes very nicely along with the fact that we are very much putting customer service right at the heart.
It absolutely is the heart of our business, customer service, and I think the other C word, if I can use that expression, is clarity. I think clarity and communication with anything to do with culture and core values is so important, and particularly communication. We need to remember as well that we don't all learn and absorb information in the same way. You can't just stick a poster on the wall.
No.
Or you can't just give them something to read, or you can't just stand up and talk to somebody. You actually need something that sort of digestible in different formats, if that's the right expression. We're exploring using video, we're exploring having stand-up sessions, meetings, huddles.
That's it.
All of these things go on, and it's just a case, it's not going to land with everybody
Nope.
all the time. You've just got to keep plugging away at it. So
Well, maybe you found a new way of definition of culture using the 5 C's approach
maybe
of clarity, communication, core value, consistency around that. Who knows?
who knows? Anyway, thank you for that.
You're welcome.